Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of All Access AM. Happy Thursday. I am Billy Embody. We're here with plenty more ACC coverage for you guys, basketball, football, transfer portal, and more as we are in full offseason mode now for football with basketball heating up. We'll have On Three's James Fletcher join us to talk some college basketball, bracketology, who are some of the stock up, stock down type of teams in the ACC as far as bracketology goes. We'll break all that down and more on this edition of All Access AM. Appreciate you guys being with us this morning and all the people who have subscribed to the channel and joined us. It is a huge deal to see us cross the 500 subscriber mark, and we are now on to that goal of hitting 1,000. That's the next big marker for this show, and we appreciate all of you who have jumped on board with us and following all of our ACC coverage. We hope you're sharing it with your ACC brethren out there, whether you're a Miami fan, maybe have an FSU fan that you're friends with. Share the show. We are trying to cover the ACC as a whole. So think of us as an extension of some of the coverage you see from the conference and beyond, those different options. That's what we're trying to get at here. And that's why we do this all year long, whether it's the football coverage during the season, transfer portal, basketball side of things, we're doing all of that. So appreciate you guys being with us. James Fletcher will be with us at 7:40 a.m. Central Time. We do this show live Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, 7 to 8 a.m. Central, 8 to 9 a.m. Eastern Time for you guys. We might be off next week. Might be off. Got a big travel schedule booked, so this might be a little reset time for the show, but we will let you know on our social channels if we're going to have a show. Might be able to pre-record some things, but not looking likely at this point. So appreciate you guys being with us, and maybe you'll miss us just enough to really lock back in with us when we're back. But we do have a lot to talk about today, and we do want to lead off with a discussion that we didn't get to last week, and that is, or last episode, and that is the ACC quarterback situation heading into 2026. It now has the clarity that we're all looking for the most part, and outside of one outstanding item for one of the programs. And we'll get to all that as we break it down on this edition of All Access AM. Do want to remind you guys as well that we do have our partnership with our friends at Horn Legend. And Horn Legend is a great company for you guys to get hooked up with. And this time of year, maybe you're upgrading your wardrobe a little bit. Horn Legend has free shipping when you buy 2 items or more. So that is a great deal. They give you the free ground shipping on 2 items or more. So check out their sports shirts. I just placed another order for some of these. They breathe so well. So you're thinking about, the summer ahead, wherever you are. It's tough to think about right now with all the cold, but Horn Legend hooks it up for you guys as far as the quality of these items. You can wear them with a sport coat. You can wear them by themselves. Just a great group of button downs that they've got going on over there. So we appreciate Horn Legend. Make sure you guys check out their entire selection at hornlegend.com. All right, we have activity in the chat, and we'll just leave that one to another episode as some colorful language dropped in there. That was really a first. That was a first on the chat. So I was all excited. I saw it pop up, but can't read that one on this show. So appreciate you guys being here. Let's jump in. ACC quarterbacks in 2026. We look at this position group large part because you have a league that I feel like has not been talked about nearly enough on the quarterback front as a whole, whereas the league itself is pushing the quarterback centric conversation around this league and the amount of talent that it has. Like you look back on the 2025 season and you list off your Darian Mensah, your Carson Beck, your Kevin Jennings, your CJ Bailey, your Chandler Morris. You think about all of the different quarterbacks that have had various amounts of success in this league and where they've been previously too. I think this is a league where, for the most part, you're seeing a lot of coaches go out and get veteran quarterbacks at certain points and build around them as well. And I think, and I'm forgetting Tommy Castellanos. This is a league that wants to invest in the quarterback position, and it shows. Haynes King, forgot about him. Cade Klubnik, of course, just saw both of those on both of those guys on Tuesday night at the Shrine Bowl. And in 2026, we're going to have not a similar amount of preseason buzz around this group, because gone is Carson Beck, Haynes King, Cade Klubnik, Chandler Morris, players like that. But you are returning some talent that, when it's on, could be even better, I think, than 2025 goes as far as the quarterback position. And that's what's next for SMU, for the ACC, is seeing these guys elevate to that next level. Like Darian Mensah is the number one returning FBS Power 4 passer in the country. Drew Mestemaker is going to Oklahoma State, but he did it at UNC or UNT. And those guys are going to have to step up to the next level, like Darian Mensah did this year. And he led the ACC in passing. Kevin Jennings was right behind him. He's back. And those two just have the ability to create major plays and are both going to be on major stages going into 2026. So I look at this league as a whole, and it has a potential for a lot of star power. And you look at some of the players that you want to really step up into that next role. And you look at a CJ Bailey, you look at a Ashton Daniels at Florida State as he arrives as the likely starter. Lincoln Kienholz arrives at Louisville. Alberto Mendoza arrives at Georgia Tech. How many of these players are going to be the next star of this league when it comes to the quarterback position? And some of them are in really good situations. Some of them will have to make a lot of plays on their own to make their stardom appear in 2026. And I get the sense that there are some schools that could have gone into this offseason and said, we're good with what we have. We're going to run it back. And they didn't. We saw changes at UNC. We saw some changes at Wake Forest as well. Virginia obviously had to go out and get a new quarterback. Virginia Tech had to replace Kyron Jones, who was out of eligibility, with James Franklin at the helm. A lot of changes across the conference. But let's go team by team, and we'll kind of break down their quarterback situation. And a special shout out goes to ESPN. They did a lot of the legwork. I'll add some color to this as well, but they are doing a lot of these positional previews across the country. And the quarterback position was one that they looked at, and they looked at it conference by conference. And a lot of these are unknowns for some people that might be in their own lane. And this early, it's almost hard to go and find this out. Like, how is the competition going? So lucky enough, some of these reporters have contacts that we are hoping to get one day at some of these schools. But let's start with Boston College. And I want to start there because, one, we're going to go alphabetical so we can kind of break this up pretty easily and give you the state of the quarterback situation at each ACC school. But we also start with Boston College because I actually love this story, because it feels like it should be a hockey transfer. And for those of you who don't know on the show, I'm a hockey guy. That is my, kind of not first love, I guess, because I grew up in Florida, but first love really. And really, I would say what I watched as far as sports go, as far as a diehard, that's what I do to get away. My son Jack played in the snow this week and had the hockey stick and is absolutely melting down that the snow is melting. And Boston College goes and gets a Saginaw Valley State transfer, which just screams like he should be getting ready to suit up for the BC Eagles on the ice. But no, Mason McKenzie is going to be the quarterback in all likelihood for this BC team. He came in as a D2 transfer from Saginaw Valley State and will probably be that starter, because you see Dylan Lonergan transfer out. You saw the Grayson James run out of eligibility, and now you have this 2025 Gatorade 2025 Player of the Year in the same conference that Trinidad Chambliss wanted in the year prior, coming over to take over your offense, which needs an absolute jolt. And he rushed for nearly 1,000 yards. So I think this is a really good ad from the standpoint of, BC is probably going to struggle from an offensive line perspective. They're probably going to be missing Turbo Richard this season in the run game. So they're going to need a quarterback who's going to do a lot of it on its own. And admittedly, haven't watched much of Mason McKenzie, but I like that for a team that did not get enough, I would say, out of the quarterback position the last 2 years. You're getting someone who at least can run the football, pick up yardage, keep the offense moving, and keep that in mind as we go through watching this BC team try to figure it out offensively and bounce back after a really ugly 2-10 season in 2025. And so I don't necessarily want to spend too much time beyond this. Grayson Wilson, an Arkansas transfer, did join the team as well, but he did not play in Fayetteville this year. And they have some other guys that are coming in the 2026 recruiting class. But Mason McKenzie was brought in to be the starter for BC. I'm sorry, guys. I'm battling through just you know runny nose. I guess it is a season, so bear with me here. If you hear some pauses there, it's trying to avoid some of that for you guys out there listening. Cal. Now, this is where we kind of hit the opposite end of the spectrum. Jaron Sagapatelli returns as the starting quarterback in 2026. Huge retention piece for Tosh Lapoy to get him back in Berkeley. And that was one of the, obviously, first moves that he had to make, was getting their stud quarterback back in this offense. And, retaining Nick Rolovich as the quarterback coach, I think was a great move as well. And, this is trending to be a Cal team that should have higher expectations in 2026. And this is a team that went to a bowl game, ultimately. And, Jaron Sagapatelli comes into this Jordan Somerville offense and a young play caller, and they should be able to mold something that at least they're very happy with on both ends of the table here. And it's JKS's job. There's no one else that you're going to look at on this roster, even though they have, some talent brought in around him. You're going to, hand the keys to the car to him. And if he gets hurt or if he can't do it for whatever reason, then you're looking at maybe like a BC type of season. But I don't think that's going to happen. Jaron Sagapatelli is going to be one of the top quarterbacks in the country as far as passing yardage goes, in my opinion. I think he finishes somewhere in the top 20, top 25. And, they really have a resurgence again in this offense. And, he threw for, he was top 17 in passing yardage last year, tossed 18 touchdowns, 9 interceptions. They're going to look to cut that down in his second year as a starter. And, Tosh Lapoy is a defensive-minded head coach. That's what his background is, coming from Oregon. He's going to want to value the football a little bit more than JKS did last year. But nonetheless, he has just oozing with talent, and excitement should be very, very high in Berkeley for the 2026 season with JKS back at the helm. You go to Clemson, which now is kind of in the middle between our first two, Boston College and Cal. But Clemson quarterback Christopher Vizina is getting the keys to the car thrown his way. Redshirt junior is going to have to battle for it with Chris Denison, though, Denson, who fits that Chad Morris offense a little bit more, you could argue. And, Chad is somebody that I've covered. He was SMU's coach for a bit there, and kind of returned them a little bit to that kind of relevancy, at least here in the city of Dallas, before Sonny Dykes came in and built on it, and then Rhett Lashley built on it. But what Chad Morris brought to SMU was an offense that was high flying. And Christopher Vizina, I watched his start against SMU, and he was able to chuck the ball down the field. Garrett Riley kind of opened it up from that point. SMU secondary was also pretty poor this year. And so you look at what Christopher Vizina did in that game, and Chad Morris has to be pretty excited for that, because you do have talent at the wide receiver position for this Clemson offense, and they're going to be able to push the ball down the field because Christopher Vizina has a big arm. Now, will Christopher Vizina be a high enough level of week in, week out quarterback to return Clemson to the top 25, return Clemson to one of the top teams in the conference? That's a question for another day. And we're gonna find out very quickly, because Clemson does open at LSU. And that game in 2026 to kick off the season is going to be a blast. September 5th, that Saturday, LSU welcomes Clemson. That is Christopher Vezina's time to shine. And what better way if you're Christopher Vezina to kick off your career and Chad Morris to return to calling plays than a win at LSU and kind of avenge what happened to you in Death Valley the year before. Once again, the battle of the Death Valleys. And Vezina only has 238 career snaps, but those are important snaps for him to be bringing into this contest. This isn't, completely cold turkey here. And if they want to use Chris Denson, they can as well. He's got a little bit more of a run threat to him. And they did bring in some talented quarterbacks in Tate Reynolds and Brock Bradley in this 2026 class. But those are the two guys that they're really leaning on going into the 2026 season. Christopher Vezina, the expected starter, but I think Chris Denson will have a lot to say about it and will get an opportunity at some point, especially depending on how that Clemson LSU game goes to kick off the season. Duke has been just brutalized by the transfer portal. I would say this is a team that is not having fun in that regard. And they have had the most important position on a team just be pillaged in the worst way. With Miami grabbing Darian Mensah from Duke, Duke's quarterback situation is just not in good shape. And Duke and Miami will face off on November 14th in what a matchup, what a salty game that is going to be. But by then, Duke's quarterback, whoever it may be at that time, will most likely be seasoned. And as of now, it's Dan Mahan who's going to be the starting quarterback for this Duke Blue Devils team. And here's the thing, though. They are bringing in San Jose State transfer quarterback Walker Eget to compete. He was a starter the last two years at San Jose State, but he's going to be needing a waiver to play in 2026. Dan Mahan did not see action last year for the Duke Blue Devils, is now going to be walking into this season as the likely starter. Henry Beeline IV stuck around a long time waiting his turn in a sense. He's now off to Missouri State to be the quarterback for Casey Woods in his first year. And Duke is going to also have a veteran in Ari Patu, a 6-year senior who previously played at North Alabama and Stanford on the roster. And Terry Walker III comes in as their 2026 signee. But just talking with people around the Duke program, I mean, this is a position that was all in on Darian Mensah. And we could spend and have spent a lot of time on Darian Mensah. And we'll have a couple notes on him here quickly before we move on to our next position or next program. But Duke really was all in on Darian Mensah, as you should be, and spending at a high level for this position with Darian Mensah. And so when he was taken by Miami, and you of course lose Cooper Barcade as well, your top wide receiver, I mean, it's a double whammy because what's the easiest way to get a new quarterback comfortable? Have a veteran receiver that you can go to. And Cooper Barcade would have been that. He would have been super easy to get involved as far as some of the crossing routes and things that they love to do to get the ball in his hands. Not to be. And so the expectations for Duke now have to go way down. And it's unfortunate, but it is what it is. And so by the time Duke plays Miami, we'll see how Dan Mahan is looking. But just I mean, kind of tragic of sorts situation, relatively speaking, for Duke to have to go through this because they kind of did everything right as far as, okay, you found a new quarterback, you got him from Tulane, you played the game, but then, he paid his buyout, he got out, and that's the name of the game. It just unfortunately happened right before the transfer portal ended as far as entries go, and it left Duke without much of an option to work through. So really, really tough deal there for Duke. There was a good article, I would say, written by our friend of the program, Ross Dellinger, who contributes to On Three. He's also a national college football writer for Yahoo Sports. And he kind of profiled where things stand and what we're about to get clarity on the Darian Mensah situation. Darian Mensah had a financial agreement with Duke as far as NIL and $4 million. And that was the value of the remaining contract with this second year. And he did kind of share in a report, although terms weren't disclosed, that Duke likely did get nearly that entire $4 million contract money that was expected as far as the buyout goes. So interesting stuff there. The question is, and will we ever get clarity on this, is will Miami get penalized that as far as its revenue sharing pool? So that's something to keep an eye on as the College Sports Commission weaves through that. But just a quick update there on Darian Menza, who has enrolled at Duke with his top wide receiver, Cooper Barkate, as well, coming over from Duke. So tough deal there for the Blue Devils. But we move on to Florida State in just a moment. But before that, we do want to remind you guys about our friends at Sportsmo. And you can support your favorite college basketball team with our friends at Sportsmo with their new option to make micro donations to that college basketball team. So check out our friends at Sportsmo, the Sportsmo app today.
College basketball hits different with Sportsmo. You tap, they score. You pledge, they drop a three. You give as a group, they win as a team. At this point, you're not watching a game, you're in it. Download the app, fund your wallet, and get in the game. Download Sportsmo. Power the play.
And we continue on. We go to Florida State. And one of the most intriguing quarterback situations in the country, I think, is how does Ashton Daniels, the former Auburn transfer, do in Tallahassee? I am a big believer that Ashton Daniels has been in the wrong situation. Whether it be at Stanford, whether it be at Auburn, he's kind of been in a no-win situation for him, whether it be lack of talent around him and him being young at Stanford, whether it be Auburn kind of being just a mess as a whole with Jackson Arnold in there and Hugh Freeze and their inability to kind of be an explosive offense just from a play calling perspective. There are a lot of different things that I think really have held Ashton Daniels back from achieving some of his goals and abilities that he can do as far as a starting quarterback for a program. Now he's going to get his shot. Florida State went after guys like DJ Lagway, Anthony Calandria, players like that, but they do land with Daniels, who did start games at Auburn and Stanford, so he does have some experience. He has 4,700 passing yards to his career, another 1,400 yards on the ground over that span. Look, Gus Malzahn, I think, is going to find a way to finally get the most out of Ashton Daniels. And that should be exciting for Seminoles fans, because this is a program that I think you have to tread carefully as far as being excited about where they're going, because this is certainly a bet. This is a big move to try and make to put your chips in the basket of Ashton Daniels. It's kind of the opposite of Tommy Castellanos, a very public departure from BC, a well-known name in this league. Ashton Daniels, relative still unknown in a sense, despite having all of this experience. I keep an eye on him. Dark horse watch for one of the players that could really emerge as a quarterback star in this league this year. So keep an eye on Ashton Daniels. They do have Dean DeNoble, a 3-year starter from the FCS who's coming in, who's super productive. They do have Malachi Marshall, and he was the junior college offensive player of the year last year. And they have Kevin Sperry, who is a good young quarterback prospect for them. And then Jaden O'Neal, another highly touted prospect coming in. So that one is going to be interesting to watch. They actually have a deep quarterback room this year for the Seminoles, and it's going to be something to keep an eye on. Georgia Tech lost Haynes King and then lost the heir apparent in Aaron Philo to Florida. And they returned Graham Knowles, a 6'7" South Lake Carroll Dragon, who has been with the program for a year, just threw one pass. It ended up being an 84-yard touchdown on a screen pass. But that was his action this season for the Yellow Jackets. And now Brent Key and this staff do have to figure out what's next. And they're going to do so with new offensive staff. And they go to the national championship winning Indiana Hoosiers to grab Alberto Mendoza, bringing him just a little bit closer to Miami than his brother Fernando Mendoza was as the Heisman Trophy winner. He comes down to Georgia Tech as a redshirt sophomore. So this is a player you could really build a future around, very similar to Haynes King. Maybe this is a situation where Georgia Tech will be able to retain, and Alberto Mendoza is coming up as a 2028 season guy where we're talking about him for a Heisman Trophy. He's that well known, he's that big of a deal in the ACC, and maybe it happens sooner. I'm just saying that that's a kind of the dream scenario for Brent Key to build around Alberto Mendoza, who portaled right after the season ended for the Hoosiers and was right there ready to rock and roll at Georgia Tech right after that. So a really, really intriguing name that comes to the conference. 6'2", 207, threw for 286 yards, completed 75% of his passes, rushed for another 190 and scored 6 total touchdowns with 1 pick in 9 appearances with Indiana this year. He is, dare I say, another dark horse. We go back-to-back dark horses here, and we might go back-to-back dark horses here. But I don't know too much about him and kind of where we see this all going with him, but I like a lot what this plan is from a multi-year perspective for Georgia Tech. And Georgia Tech may be, and I know expectations are very high, maybe taking a step back. Maybe in terms of win-losses, it ends up being more of the same for Georgia Tech because they did kind of at the end, falter off a little bit there, didn't achieve where they really wanted to end up being late in the season, with some of those losses. But nonetheless, you get Justice Haynes in that backfield with an Alberto Mendoza, you commit to the run game, and you let him really slide into that starting role and get some experience because Haynes King had experience coming from Texas A&M. Alberto Mendoza has some as well, but really Haynes King had a lot of it going into his career with Georgia Tech. So a little bit of a difference there, but I'm obviously with what his brother Fernando Mendoza has done, you've got to keep an eye on Alberto and what he could do in this Georgia Tech offense. So going to be fascinating to watch that one unfold. Louisville brings in another player that you could categorize as a dark horse type of quarterback, but you see the amount of talent that he has. Lincoln Kienholz comes over from Ohio State. And this is different from Miller Moss, Tyler Shook, who had starting experience. He is being brought in to be the starter at Louisville. There's no question about that. He does have a little bit more of an ability to move around. I think that's something that Louisville felt like it had to address and give them a little bit more of an option there to extend and make plays and do all those things. You do have Isaac Brown coming back. You have a bunch of talent around this program that you've brought in through the transfer portal, one of the top transfer portal hauls in the entire country. So the pressure is on to win now. This might be Jeff Brom's best coaching job if he immediately gets Lincoln Kienholz to be off and cooking early. They open against Ole Miss in Nashville in a neutral site game, and then they face SMU 2 weeks later at home. So 2 early tests there with 2 teams that have playoff aspirations, like Louisville, which does have playoff aspirations. That's why they invested. That's why they got their situation together to figure this out. They invest in Lincoln Kienholz. They made the move quickly. He's been on campus learning the playbook, and I'm really intrigued to see how this pans out because he's been somebody that waited his turn. He was class 2023. He ended up not getting the job at Ohio State. And, will he be Joe Burrow or will he be one of the other Ohio State cast-offs that's, has gone somewhere else and it just didn't pan out after being a highly touted guy like a Devin Brown somewhere else. So going to be interesting to watch that one unfold. We do get to Miami, and I don't want to spend too much time on Miami because we all know what Darian Mensah brings to the table. He's one of the nation's best passers. He is the top returning Power 4 passing yardage leader in the country since he did it at Duke last year. He is going to bring a lot to this Miami offense. And the question I would have is, will he be able to perform right off the bat? Because late in the season, he did for Duke, and they figured it out in conference play. But non-conference was also a mess, and Duke did not play well until the bowl game. And that is something to keep an eye on. Carson Beck was so steady. Darian Mensah is immensely talented. He is going to bring a higher upside to this Miami offense. Will he be as good as they need him to be right off the bat? that is something I'm watching very closely. 35 touchdowns, just 6 picks as he threw for 3,900 yards or so this season. Darian Mensah is on Miami's campus. He brought Cooper Barkate with him. He has Malachi Toney. We know all of those options that are there for him and the explosiveness of this Miami's offense that could be with Darian Mensah at the helm. I'm betting on it being explosive, but just keep it in the back of your mind. Darian Mensah didn't exactly, this was still a Duke team that lost 5 games. That's all I'm going to say. We'll see how it goes in Miami with an upgraded team around him from a talent perspective. I expect big things from Miami. I expect them to be right there again to get to the college football playoff. And if they do make it in, it'll be in large part because of Darian Mensah. Before we get to North Carolina, I do want to remind you guys about another one of our sponsors and another one who offers free shipping when you buy multiple items, and that is Socorro Tequila. Get free shipping on 3 bottles or more of their award-winning tequila, and make sure you guys shop their Extra Añejo, the 5-year reserve that is specially bottled to celebrate 5 years of Socorro. This is an incredible bottle. I've finally tasted it. Just really, really high-end stuff here that you're going to want to package up and include in your order. So why don't you try their Blanco, try their Reposado, try their Añejo. You could do all of those things while also tossing in that Extra Añejo, the 5-year Reserva de Pablo. Just incredible tasting notes there on that. So make sure you guys give that a try, you tequila enthusiasts out there. So support our friends at Socorro Tequila and let us know what you think in the comments of Socorro as well. It's a great award-winning tequila brand that supports us here at All Access AM. We will have James Fletcher join us in just a moment. We will go to North Carolina, NC State real quick before we wrap up our quarterback conversation on the other side of it. UNC did add Billy Edwards Jr., a redshirt senior, Wisconsin transfer who's well-traveled. He replaces Gio Lopez. He teams up with Bobby Petrino, and maybe Bobby Petrino has some of his best coaching left in him as Bill Belichick and Bobby Petrino are teaming up to revitalize this UNC offense that did not meet expectations in year one. Freddie Kitchens and Gio Lopez both gone. Billy Edwards Jr. is well-traveled. He's been around the block a bunch, in his college career, 6-year senior coming into this program. And if he clicks and if he plays to his potential, who knows what this offense could mean to a UNC team that really fell just short in certain situations this year and just wasn't able to get over the hump. I mean, think about when we were following that UNC team, just how close they were to punching through and getting a couple of those wins. They had some that were just taken from their grips in the final moments. If the offense would have had a little bit of a pulse last year, maybe that changes. They're looking to have that change with Billy Edwards at the helm as he comes in after missing most of last season due to injury. This is his 3rd program in 5 years after spending time at Wisconsin and Maryland. He has 28 career games under his belt, 3,400 passing yards, 19 touchdowns, 10 picks. If he's not healthy, this is a quarterback room that, has Miles O'Neal, Texas A&M transfer who they could go to, but they don't have too much beyond that. So once again, UNC's quarterback situation, certainly no Tom Brady in that room for Bill Belichick. And finally, NC State, this is a quick one. CJ Bailey is one of the shining stars, I think, at the quarterback position in this conference. What he's been able to do with, I think, still in a way, a lack of support around him has been impressive. You've seen NC State kind of get pillaged year in, year out. So each year he's having to revamp who's around him. Hollywood Smothers is gone. Jacarius Peak is gone. We saw Casey Concepcion leave before this last season. He really took a step up this year as far as his production as well. And, they were kind of the giant killer. They beat Virginia, beat Georgia Tech, had some of those big wins this year, but just, again, the consistency of the program as a whole just isn't there, which has people clamoring for a change at the top. But CJ Bailey did add JoJo Trader to his wide receiver room, so he's got that going for him. They will have to cut down on just their inability to consistently move the ball when they need to against lesser opponents. It's not a problem to get up against bigger opponents, but CJ Bailey does have a ton of talent. He has a lot of production. He's over 3,100 yards through the air this year, completed 69% of his passes. Really talented player, and I think he has a chance to be an all ACC performer this year. They don't have much behind him as well, so they'll have to go into the portal in all likelihood for 2027. But for 2026, NC State has CJ Bailey back, which is a big deal. Speaking of big deal, it is always a big deal to have our friend James Fletcher on the show, and we appreciate him stopping by this morning to do some bracketology with you guys on All Access AM. James, good to see you this morning. How are you, man?
I'm doing good. Happy to be here and talking about some bracketology, some updates coming later today at On 3. So you guys are going to get kind of the first look here of what we've got coming out just here in about an hour or two.
Last time you released a bracketology update, it was a few days ago. You had a new number one overall seed. Will there be a new number one overall seed today?
I think that they've done enough to hold on to it for the time being. Arizona, of course, remains undefeated. They put together a big win against BYU on the road, so that's going to do wonders for their resume. And while Michigan, yes, did follow up that shift with a win on at home, against Nebraska, I think that Arizona is going to hold on to that top spot. And really, it's interesting because the timing that we have these bracketology updates, it can really make a big difference. Because if I had updated the bracket just before that Michigan-Nebraska game, Duke probably would have had that number 2 overall seed. That's how close these top seeds have gotten over the past couple of weeks. But as it stands, Michigan beats Nebraska, formerly undefeated. Looks like they're right up in the mix. So they will just hold on to that number 2 overall seed for now, as of this morning. But they've got a tough schedule coming up. Duke has some opportunities. And so there's nothing set in stone yet. Even Arizona, they could, if they take a loss, be moved down the board with those other 2 right behind them as things stand right now.
How much does Duke's win over Louisville and the way they did it and the margin they did it impact them as far as how you look at them for a potential number 1 overall seed? Because of course they're sitting on the number 1 seed line right now, but how much does that change things in their regard?
Yeah, it's very important. You want to see them get big wins. Of course, that's why Michigan had so much of a buffer earlier in the season that when they took their first loss, they held on to the number 1 overall seed for some amount of time. It was that 40-point win against Gonzaga. It was the 40-point win against Auburn. Those were the ones that had boosted not just their resume. We look at a couple of things when we're putting together the bracket. There's the resume on paper. That's when we look at the quadrant system and how many quad 1 wins versus how many quad 2 losses, things like that as we go down the list. But then there's going to come a point where you're going to have to evaluate not just that, but the eye test as well. That plays a role. And of course, a 40-point win, a big win like Duke had against Louisville, beating the team twice the way that Duke did against Louisville, that's going to play a role. And then you get into the analytics. You start looking at the KenPom data. You look at the net rankings, Bart Torvik's numbers. Wins above the bubble is an important one in the past couple of years that we've seen emerge and have some sway. So it does a lot for the analytics when you blow out a team, particularly a team that is thought of highly by the numbers. Now, there's 2 sides to that coin, because the kind of interesting dilemma that you always face in analytics is, well, if I blow out a team that was considered to be really good, yes, it's going to boost my numbers, but it's going to knock down their numbers. So I'm almost, the more that I win by, making the win look less impressive to the computers. So it's a weird balance there that you have to find. But yes, it does do a lot for them to put together a big win, because a big win implies that you had good offensive efficiency, defensive efficiency, and you put those things together into a result that will reflect across all of those data points that I'm looking at.
And NC State, speaking of big wins, that's another one that, getting that win over Clemson, seeing the stock go up for Will Wade's crew, in bracketology. I mean, what's your takeaway as far as where they stand now, after some key wins, sitting at 27th in the net?
Yeah, I think that they've been a big riser. Had them as one of the winners of the past week or so in my last Bubble Watch update just yesterday, because I think that Will Wade's team early in the season, we saw them looking for their identity. We saw them searching, and even into the new year, into the ACC schedule, we kind of got the feeling that if they put it together, they're going to start rising, but they've still got some pieces, just some familiarity that they need to create. Well, I'm not sure if they've perfected things, but the computers love what they've been doing recently. They've shot up the board, like you said, inside the top 30 in most of the key metrics that they need to be. And so they're really rising up the board quickly and getting out of the bubble conversation more into the conversation of teams that are into the field at this point. That Clemson win obviously did wonders for them too on that paper resume that I was talking about. That's a quad one win for now. And then you look at the rest of the schedule and you say, all right, they've got more opportunities to build this thing up and really lock themselves into the field here.
When you look at a team like UNC now that they've gotten that back on track, beat Virginia, that I think in terms of the overall ACC picture really helps. That really puts, teams kind of maybe beating each other up a little bit, and kind of creating that good group that could go into the field. I mean, you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 into the field right now, 2 on the bubble and 3 still in the picture. This league shows its depth. And despite UNC going out to Cal and Stanford and losing those games, they're right back in a more, not that they were out or on the bubble, but a more stable situation following that win over Virginia.
Yeah, it was an important one for them to get because not only was it 2 losses that don't look particularly good on your resume against Cal and Stanford, but it was also 2 losses that really hurt their defensive metrics. That's a team that was struggling on that end of the floor, and they didn't fully right the ship against Virginia, but getting a win against the top team is going to give you the boost that you need across the other 2 areas and really kind of paper over some of those issues as they continue to try to fix the defense. I think that they've shown little pieces and little strides, but still more work to go on that end of the floor. And that's really going to determine how high they can get seated and also how far they can go in the NCAA tournament. I think that they're a team that has a clear flaw that they have the opportunity to patch up, the opportunity to keep fixing as we go through this season. It'll be interesting to see how well they're able to correct that going into the postseason, because this is a team that on offense, yes, they are right up there and can compete with anyone as long as they've got things going on the other end of the floor.
Miami with Jai Lucas has been kind of a revelation here, getting into such a bounce back year for that program as a whole. They're sitting on the bubble for you. What do you see as far as the team goes that still needs to be worked out to move them into the field if they can do X, Y, and Z on the floor? Obviously, you've got to get some key wins for this program as well, but they've just kind of been chipping away here. I mean, they're probably an early favorite for a number 1 seed in the NIT at worst.
Yeah, Miami's an interesting one to kind of gauge here because they're 17-4, so really good record at this point in the season, but they don't have the big wins. That's what's kind of holding them back. They're on the right side of the bubble here, don't get me wrong. When we talk about the bubble at this point in the season with over a month left to go, we're really talking about teams from the 9 seed line all the way down through the next 4 out. So it's a pretty wide range there to consider them in the bubble mix. And the reason that I make such a wide bubble market here is because they're 1 loss away from falling potentially a full seed line because of how tight it is across those competitors. So if you're Miami, you've got to string together meaningful wins. I think it's about winning at the right time if you want to rise your stock above that conversation. But in the meantime, I think that they've got everything they need to land inside the field. Jay Lucas has done an incredible job in that first season, getting that ship where it needs to be. This program is clearly headed in the right direction. They've got some exciting young talent. And I'm interested to see down the stretch, can they put together, like I said, wins against the Dukes, the Virginias, the teams that are going to give you a full seed jump the other direction? Can you pick up enough of those wins in order to get yourself into the 6, 7, 8 seed conversations rather than 9, 10, and then risking being in that 11 seed conversation right on the bubble?
How do you look at a Virginia Tech team that I feel like is just right there, has had some heartbreaking losses that are certainly going to impact them on their resume, but nonetheless, they appear to be a team that it should be and is on a bubble and in that kind of world as far as at least having an opportunity to earn its way into the field. But at the end of the day, they just have come up short multiple times, and those close losses, they probably have to, I would say, help in terms of analytics. Like, you're not getting blown out really, but at the end of the day, wins and losses still matter.
Yeah, they are firmly in the first 4 out mix, and they are one of the many teams on the bubble that has greatly benefited by just how few teams have capitalized on opportunities at the bubble. You look at these teams, and really the bubble hasn't shifted. The teams that are in each position might have shifted, but the base kind of from your last 4 buys down through your next 4 out, those teams have not really shifted in terms of which names we're talking about. There's no one who's capitalizing below them and raising their stock into the conversation, and there's nobody who's been up in the field who has dropped their stock enough that they've allowed one of them up into that next tier. So we're talking about a pretty consistent group of teams throughout the year. And so you're having to lean, yes, on those analytics. So that's what's helped Virginia Tech stay into that mix as strongly as they have to this point. Like you said, they're right on the cusp. They've got the opportunity to have a breakthrough here down the stretch. They're going to need to, though, because nobody is really differentiating themselves to that point. You know that somebody's going to break out. Somebody's going to have a string of good results. And so if you're them and you're already on the wrong side of things, just barely at this point, you're going to need to give yourself a boost and differentiate yourself somehow, make yourself stand out, or you're going to be really sweating things out on Selection Sunday.
Do you think Louisville and do you see them making any kind of a run moving up into the bracket a little bit more, or are you starting to see a little bit of like red flags popping up with the Cardinals?
I think they're a difficult one to pin down still at this point, because Mikel Brown, to be honest, we just haven't seen a whole lot of. He's dealt with injuries throughout the season. Even when he has been healthy on the floor, we've seen kind of a dichotomy in terms of his performances. We've seen really good, pretty efficient 20-point type performances where he looks like he's kind of controlling the game, the 5-star prospect, the potential top 10 pick that we've expected him to be entering the season. And then you see him in a couple of other games, this Duke one being kind of the chief among them, where you think, man, he is really kind of struggling as a freshman to find ways in big games to put up big numbers. Now, that's to be expected from a guy who is both coming off of injury and a freshman figuring out the game, but it's still going to be very important. They've put a lot of trust in him to run this offense. I think at the big position, they're facing similar issues where you just look at that center position and they don't have a dominant force. They've got good role players. They've got people who can hold it down. But when you face the best teams in college basketball, sometimes you're going to need a difference maker at either the point guard or the center position. They're going to have to either get a big leap out of Mikel Brown or get just a rising from the group as a whole if they're going to make any kind of deep run. But yes, they're still a really solid team. We're talking about, can they be in that inner circle of contenders at this point? And they've just got something missing from that.
Is it Duke and everybody else in this league of the ACC? And do you see, I don't want to say any way, but any way that they don't come away with the conference championship in Charlotte in a few months?
Now, here's the thing. A conference tournament can go all kinds of different ways. Who knows how that will play out? I definitely think that in a conference tournament setting where it's a single elimination bracket, you're playing day after day, there's no question that a team could beat Duke. Virginia is plenty good. We know about the Duke-UNC rivalry and how that just ramps things to a whole different level for both sides. So maybe you get the best defensive performance of the year out of a UNC team that's really playing for something. Who knows? Who's to say? You've even seen other teams in the ACC who have gotten close. There's a lot of talent in this league. None of it is constructed as well together or kind of as cohesive at this point in the season as what Duke has. That's for sure. But there's teams out there that I think can give Duke a run that could definitely beat them in a single elimination. Now, if we're talking about the regular season title, I think that's pretty much wrapped up by Duke. They are, like I said, very consistent, going out there night in, night out. They've got their steady force in Cam Boozer. They've got some veteran pieces around him that have kind of held down the ship, because this Duke team, as good as they are, as much as we're talking about them as a potential number 1 overall seed in the NCAA tournament, they've had a couple of guys that have not provided as much as they thought they would. Dame Sarr, Nicholas Kamenia have both been real hit or miss pieces on the wing there for them. And they've just kind of papered things back together around that with the veterans, with the freshmen who have come in and have made an impact. So this is a team that there's only potential for them to get even better if they can get one of those two guys right down the stretch. So yeah, I think that they're the regular season heavy favorites. In the conference tournament, they're definitely the favorites, but it's a single elimination tournament. Anything can happen there. You never know, especially this far out.
And this weekend, another good group of ACC games in action. SMU at Louisville, 1 p.m. Central, ESPN. What's your preview of that game? I think SMU is a team that, when their guard play is on, when Boopy Miller's on, they're going to be really tough to beat in this league. We even saw them without Boopy Miller kind of hang around against Duke at Cameron Indoor. Louisville with Michael Brown back now. This is shaping up to be such a fun matchup, I think, up there at the Yum Center.
Yeah, I'm really excited. This is kind of my marquee matchup for the ACC this weekend, because two teams that could really use an impressive win on their resume to kind of raise the stock. SMU is really sneaky, I think, in the ACC. And I think it's part to do with they're still the new kid in town in that conference. And yes, they've had great runs in football. They've had great runs in basketball. But we're just not used to talking about them as one of the top teams in this conference yet. But here they are, and they keep performing on a regular basis. They cannot be slept on, and they're a team that has not gotten the national recognition to this point, but they are fully capable. They've got the point guard play. They've got the bigs to match up, and they're going up against a Louisville team that, like I said, some inconsistencies that have popped up. So it's going to be interesting to see if SMU can go in there on the road and pick up a win. It will be huge for their resume down the stretch. If Louisville can kind of right things after another Duke loss, that would be important for them as they start to try to build back up and get Mikel Brown and that group on the right track to re-enter the conversation as a contender.
Duke at Virginia Tech, too, at 11 a.m. Central on ESPN. That's a fun one, I think, to watch. That, again, you talk about a program that's really looking for a signature win. Could Virginia Tech get that done against Duke? That would be massive for the Hokies. But you got to like Duke, and obviously every single matchup. That's just one that also stuck out to me looking at the schedule for Saturday.
Yeah, that's one where I'm definitely going to have that one on because I want to see Neokilis Avdalis play against top-level competition. He's not only a rising star as a freshman in the ACC at Virginia Tech, but he's also a draft prospect, comes from overseas, plays a really fun brand of basketball. His efficiency has kind of dipped through conference play. He's kind of struggling to get through the rigors of the college basketball schedule, but if he can have a big performance, which we know he's capable of, we've seen it this season, he could definitely get the Hokies in the mix of that game and cause some real problems for that Duke defense throughout it.
James Fletcher, we appreciate all the time. A wealth of knowledge on the NCAA tournament projections, bracketology, and more. We appreciate the time.
Always. Happy to be on.
There he goes. James Fletcher, enjoy the weekend of college basketball, my friend. We appreciate it. And appreciate you guys for listening to us at All Access AM. Make sure you guys hit that subscribe button as well. We've got a few more quarterbacks to break down in this league, and then we'll kind of close out here with some quick thoughts on transfer portal winners and losers, but really the winners of this ACC. We got asked this question and just wanted to highlight a couple other teams that have done a good job in the transfer portal in the ACC world this year. And when you look at the quarterback positions, though, let's get back on track with Pitt. Pitt has one of the best situations, you could argue, going into the 2026 season from a pure starter perspective, because you went to Mason Heinschel with his freshman year early in the season, and he took off. The Panthers were able to go on such a special run and make moves and have that special win down in Atlanta over Georgia Tech. You had the massive implications with the Notre Dame and Miami games that didn't go your way, but Pitt nonetheless is positioned to be a team that is right in the mix for the ACC championship because you have Mason Heinschel. They went to him after a 2-2 start, and he took off with 2,354 yards passing, 16 touchdowns, 8 picks. He kind of ended up being a little turnover prone, in particular late, but they won 6 of their last 9 games, and really is trending to be one of those top passers in the league. I think going into 2026, if you're looking for a all ACC preseason selection that maybe should be getting talked about more, it's probably Mason Heinschel. Eli Holstein's gone. This is his show. His offensive coordinator, Cade Bell, one of the tops in the country that, again, doesn't get talked about enough. They have a lot of talent around him still, with, I believe, Desmond Reed still coming back. They do lose some of their other talent. They lost to the portal and Kenny Johnson, but they have a lot still to like because you have Mason Heinschel going into his second, not only year as a starter, but second full offseason. I mean, this is a guy that enrolled early and got settled in to Pitt and then produced the way he did when he was called on. So big deal for Pitt. They quietly retained him. There's no drama, and that's what you want. Is your Pitt Panther quarterback, Mason Heinschel, back and ready to rock for 2026. Speaking of ready to rock for 2026, is this perfect timing. Kevin Jennings tweeted out one of those highlight videos you see all these college players getting in the offseason done, and it just reminds you of the special talent that Kevin Jennings is for SMU. The arm angles that he throws with, the ability to escape and make plays, and this is a player that battled through an ankle injury that really every so often would feel like a setback. He'd go down and be holding it, and you're like, okay, this is it. This is when, they're going to have to go to Ty Hawkins, their backup, or they're, going to be without Kevin Jennings for a little bit. But he popped right up, and he ended up being a top 10 passer in terms of passing yards in the country. He improved his completion percentage. His interception total, thanks to that bowl game second half, ended up being just one fewer. It's really unfortunate the way the bowl game ended for Kevin Jennings in a sense, but don't forget, it's a 60-minute football game. He was able to, be completely on in the first half against Arizona and led SMU to its first bowl win in a while and send them into the offseason with a little bit of momentum, after losing that Cal game. I think for Kevin Jennings, with him being healthy, you look for him to be more consistent as a whole. That's the next and final step in this final chapter for him. But the expectations should be and are high for SMU. And, as somebody who covers SMU, I always, try to lean on some of the other national group that covers the ACC. And you hear them talk about Kevin Jennings and the respect that he has earned with wins over Miami and Louisville and, beating Florida State the way he did and leading SMU to that magical run in 2024. This is a player that just doesn't get talked about enough because some of those moments that he's had on, the national stage against Penn State. And that's really what a lot of people remember about him. But you got to look at, hey, they're the ones that are there. Kevin Jennings led SMU to a college football playoff appearance. Cam Ward didn't. Cam Ward got a lot of the buzz in 24. Darian Mensah got a lot of the buzz in 2025 with Duke and what he was able to do. But man, Duke, just did not have, this incredible season with all the losses in non-conference. They just happened to end up being a team that found themselves, thanks to the tiebreakers, in an ACC championship, and they took advantage. And Kevin Jennings did it battling through an ankle injury. So there should be more hype around him. There are parts of his game that he still has to get right, but they add Kendrick Raphael, nearly 1,000-yard ACC rusher last year for Cal, into the backfield. They have a lot of good offensive line talent back, especially on that right side with the projected, really high draft pick in PJ Williams anchoring that right side. And you have a lot of talent coming up at the skill positions that they've surrounded him with. So lots of expectations for Kevin Jennings in 2026. And the situation is a good one for SMU at the quarterback position. Stanford has one of the more intriguing ones because Davis Warren went 6-3 as a starter for Michigan in 2024 before Bryce Underwood came in 2025, and he ended up having a torn ACL in that bowl game against Alabama, which was just devastating. He spent this past year rehabbing and was able to get one more year of eligibility. He now does it at Stanford. He threw for 1,199 yards, 64% completion percentage, 7 touchdowns, 9 interceptions at Michigan, but kind of a steady guy, veteran player. This is going to be maybe a natural handoff to one of the young players at Stanford that's coming in. And this is a team that is always going to, I think, in the future, under Tavita Pritchard, as Andrew Luck continues to put his imprints on this program, prioritize the quarterback position at a high level. And so keep an eye on how this position plays out throughout the year, if there's an eventual handoff maybe, and get some of these younger guys like Dylan Risk, Charlie Meyer, or Michael Mitchell, who was their highly touted 2026 hand them off to the next line here, depending on how this Stanford season goes. But if Stanford's not going to wow you, they're going to look to control the ball, shorten the game, and Davis Warren kind of fits that perfectly because that's what Michigan did in his career in a sense. He's got to take care of the ball better going into the season. Expectations are really low for Stanford, but this is one of the quarterbacks, I think, when you look up and down, that kind of fits exactly what they want to do from a game manager type of perspective. Syracuse went out and did add multiple quarterbacks in the transfer portal to compete with Steve Angeli, but he's coming off of that torn Achilles, and that's why they did that. Don't forget, he was the best in terms of passing yards when he got hurt. He actually ended up leading the country, I think, for another 2 weeks after his Achilles injury, and in particular the ACC. And Syracuse had just knocked off Clemson when he got hurt. Unfortunate situation for him because he was just starting to roll. And if he can get back to that, Syracuse will be one of those teams that you see the biggest jump back up in terms of wins, get back to a bowl like they did in that 2024 season under Kyle McCord. But we've seen what Steve Angeli can be. We see, the losses of Ajante Cook transferring out. So that's a receiver that had a lot of success, I think, for Syracuse last year. But Fran Brown and that team, despite changing some of the offensive staff, they're going to have a quarterback that they believe in, assuming he's healthy. And if he is, that is a scary situation for some of these teams that are going to have to defend Steve Angeli. Because, again, he was lights out, and the Orange are a little scary to be dealing with going into this one. So closing it out with Virginia and Virginia Tech. Virginia brings in Bo Pribula and Eli Holstein, and the plan would be for Bo Pribula to play this year, be the guy, be the starter. He was 6-1 as a starter before a dislocated ankle at Missouri. He was, kind of turnover prone to an extent, 17 touchdowns to 11 interceptions over those 7 games or so, but came back, battled through that injury to play. And Eli Holstein comes into the program as a great insurance policy, an experienced passer. They could end up having Eli Holstein redshirt and then handing the job off to him in 2026 if they want to. That could be a true competition, but Bo Pribula has experience playing for James Franklin back at Penn State, and now comes to this has experience playing for James Franklin at Penn State, which makes it funny because he's now at Virginia taking over for Chandler Morris in Tony Elliott's scheme, and he will get to face his former head coach James Franklin at Virginia Tech this year. So I'm higher on Bo Pribula than most. I don't think this one gets talked about enough because he has been around the block. He's been on a playoff team. He has some of that winning way about him, despite not being a statistical darling as far as TD to INT ratio. He has over 2,200 yards, all purpose last year. So productive player in that Missouri offense. When you get to Virginia Tech, last, but certainly actually not last, I take that back. Forget about Wake. Sorry. I need to learn my alphabet. Virginia Tech, Ethan Grunkmeyer, the redshirt sophomore, Penn State transfer, comes into the program. Again, one with familiarity with James Franklin, and a player that led Penn State after that Drew Aller injury, makes the move to Blacksburg. And this is probably the reason why there are some trendy picks here for Virginia Tech to be a program that could surprise, that could very well get back to a bowl game and step up the expectation level going into 2027. But because you have Ethan Grunkmeyer and his familiarity with these former Penn State coaches now at Virginia Tech, there's a lot to like in that regard. I think there might be just a little bit too much like. I think a James Franklin team is going to be hard to beat, and I think that's what Virginia Tech's going to be this year. I do worry that there's just not enough around him just yet, despite being one of the top transfer portal classes in the ACC, to take them to that. Okay, they're challenging for maybe a dark horse spot for the ACC championship. I think there's going to be some growing pains early, and they're going to be building this thing long term. And so they're not going to sacrifice certain things for that immediate success under James Franklin, as much as he'd love to get there and kind of stick it to Penn State a little bit. I just am not sure. I like Ethan Grunkmeyer. I like this pickup. I think it raises their floor. I don't know if they are going to be punching up and being this revelation in the ACC this year. I just think they're going to be a good, hard to beat team. Wake Forest, I think this is a part of why you have to consider Wake potentially taking a step back in 2026 under Jake Dickert and the staff, is Gio Lopez coming in as the transfer quarterback. He's got 2 years of eligibility left, so you can build around him for 26 and 27. But you do have a player now who already has that seasoning under his belt, having played at UNC. He was in a poor offensive situation. No question about that. They did not give him much help. They did not make things work. But now you have a player in Gio Lopez that comes into this Wake Forest team seasoned over 2 years of starting between South Alabama and North Carolina. Maybe he can find his footing in this offense. The problem is, I don't think Wake Forest really has enough weapons around him. You do have, Damon Claiborne was one of the best backs last year, but he's gone. He's off to the NFL draft, and that's going to be really hard to replace. I watched one of their top offensive linemen in the East-West Shrine Bowl, I forget his name, really shine in that bowl game and impress. Falili Fiamore. I'm butchering that, but there's a lot off this Wake Forest team that they lost. I think they take a big step back in 2026, and that doesn't mean I don't like Jake Dickert and where they're headed, but they just have to continue to get their house in order to be competitive year after year. So they'll look to do that with Gio Lopez. That's a big bet to take. I feel like they could have gone and gotten somebody else, but that's just me. Gio Lopez doesn't seem like this massive step forward out after the Robbie Ashford, Deshaun Purdy experiment last year and how those guys did. So that is the rundown on your ACC quarterbacks. A couple of transfer portal winners here in the ACC, according to On3. Winners include, of course, Miami, getting Darian Mensah, getting Cooper Barkate, but they also added Boston College safety Omar Thornton. They added Conrad Hussey as a secondary addition from Morgan State, who brings some depth. Nebraska defensive lineman Keona Davis is going to contribute, but mainly Damon Wilson from Missouri is a huge pickup. South Carolina receiver Vandravius Jacobs and West Virginia wide receiver Cam Vaughn. Those are two guys that you're going to be on the lookout for in that passing attack for Miami. That's another transfer portal winner there. And then you look at Virginia Tech, and adding an Ethan Grunkmeyer is going to help. He's a name brand from Penn State. He knows the offense, all those things. Luke Reynolds is I think going to be all ACC tight end. Comes over from Penn State as well. He had 257 yards in 2025. And then they had Javion Hilson, who is a really highly thought of transfer coming over from Missouri. And Troy cornerback Jacquez White will be one of the top defensive backs in the ACC right away if he makes that jump up from Troy after having 3 interceptions last year. Louisville had another great class in the ACC, I feel like, from a transfer perspective, just who they brought in, adding players like Caleb Beasley from Tennessee, who could shore up the secondary, Evan Wibberly coming over from Kentucky, Travarius Banks from Ole Miss, played a lot this year. They just really, I think, went all in on some of these defensive players that they needed to really help complement this offense that has enough with guys like Trey Richardson, Isaac Brown, maybe Lincoln Kineholtz if he hits. They have some players that you're really going to be high on going into the season offensively if they put it all together. And of course, Eric's Doherty, big offensive lineman from BC, who's going to come over and start for the Cards on the offensive line. So those were some of the other winners of the transfer portal on the ACC. We appreciate you guys for joining us on this long All Access AM. We hope you guys enjoyed it. Please support our sponsors, Socorro Tequila, and our friends at Horn Legend as well. Check them out and support them. We appreciate all of you guys who listen, watch, subscribe. Please subscribe to the channel. Help us grow. And we appreciate you guys joining us on this edition of All Access AM. I don't think we're going to catch you guys next week. I think we're going to take a clean cut break. We'll be back the week later, and we'll reset with even more in-depth looks at the transfer portal for each of these programs. Going to try to get that organized for you guys, and we hope you guys enjoyed this. I will see you guys after a much-needed break following the season. So hope you guys enjoyed this edition of All Access AM. We'll catch you guys next time. Thanks for listening, and have a great weekend, everyone.